Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
The steak was dry, the wine was too sweet, and the room buzzed with that forced kind of cheer that only families manage to create when half the people don't really want to be there. It was my 30th birthday dinner, and the Brooks family had gathered like they always did for milestones, loudly, proudly, and entirely convinced that the world revolved around drywall, marble countertops, and construction bids. My father sat at the head of the long oak table, all polished and patriarchal, nursing a scotch he'd been sipping since 4. My mother, always impeccably overdressed, kept adjusting the vase in the center like symmetry could somehow keep the mood under control. Everyone else, my cousins, my sister Lisa with her ever-present Bluetooth earpiece, and Uncle Rick, Uncle Rick, were already a few drinks in and talking shop. And by shop, I mean the family business. Brooks Development Group. Founded by my grandfather after he came back from Korea with 2 hands and zero tolerance for excuses. My whole life, every holiday, every Sunday dinner, every backyard barbecue revolved around cement, site permits, and who landed which county contract this quarter. I'd grown up with the scent of sawdust in my nostrils and the weight of expectation on my back. But I'd never wanted to build shopping centers or bid on state-funded condo complexes. I wanted something different. Not better, just different. So I chose screens instead of steel, code instead of concrete. And in this family, that was as close to treason as it got. The evening had hummed along in its usual way, polite digs from Lisa about my cute little projects, sideways glances from my father every time someone brought up money, and Rick dominating the conversation like he was holding court. Then dessert came out, chocolate lava cake and some overpriced bourbon, and Rick, predictably, stood up with a glass in hand. He's the kind of guy who thinks his voice belongs on a podcast no one asked for. Loud, confident, and always assuming everyone's dying to hear what he has to say. All right, he boomed, clinking his fork against his glass while Lisa shushed the youngest cousins. Let's raise a glass for the birthday boy. I should have known. I really should have known. To Ethan, Rick said, stretching out my name like it had a punchline built in. The one who didn't follow the family path. The lone wolf. The rebel. There were a few chuckles already. My mother offered a stiff smile and stared at her napkin like it had secrets. Rick went on, grinning like he was setting up a killer joke. Still waiting on that breakthrough, huh? And just like that, the table erupted into laughter. Not a roar, not a cackle, but the kind that starts with 2 people and catches like fire and dry brush. Lisa was the first to crack. Her laugh had that nasal edge she usually saved for real estate clients she hated. My cousin Derek slapped the table like Rick had just dropped a zinger on Comedy Central. Even Dad let out a sharp breath that might have been a chuckle or maybe just gas. But it didn't matter. They laughed. They all laughed. I looked around the room and felt the heat climb my neck. My heart was thumping so loud I could feel it behind my eyes. And, still, I smiled. A clean, polite smile. The kind you learn in meetings where you're pitching to people who already decided you're not worth their time. I raised my glass. To family, I said. My voice didn't crack. My hand didn't shake. I was a statue. A perfect fucking statue. And the worst part? They moved on. The moment passed. They shifted back to talking about a new golf course development Rick was bidding on and whether Lisa was going to get her promotion to VP. Just like that, I disappeared again, folded into the wallpaper, just the guy they all remembered had potential until he started chasing apps. I sat there for another 40 minutes, swirling my drink and wondering why I still came to these things. Why I still let them have that kind of access to me. And the answer was as painful as it was simple because some part of me still wanted to be seen. Not clapped for, not celebrated. Just fucking seen. When I got back to my apartment that night, the first thing I did was toss the blazer I'd worn onto the kitchen floor. It felt heavy with their voices, their laughter, the stale scent of judgment. I stood in the dark for a long time, just looking out the window at the lights of the city. I wondered if they would have laughed if they knew what was coming. If Rick would have opened his big mouth if he had any clue what I'd been working on the past year. What I'd built. What was about to launch. Because 2 days later, Forbes released their annual 30 Under 30 issue. And there I was on the fucking cover. Front and center. In a black tee. Smiling just enough. But that wasn't even the best part. The best part was the subject line of the email I got that morning from Uncle Rick. It read, "Hey Ethan, let's talk business. Got a few ideas you might be interested in." No joke. Not even a congrats. Just a pitch. Like none of it had ever happened. And in that moment, all I could think was, now what the hell do I do with this? The first time I slept on that futon, it felt like freedom, and it felt like hell. I had just dropped out of college with 2 semesters left, packed up my things in the middle of the night, and left a polite little email on the department head's inbox explaining I'd chosen a different path. That was the official version. The real version involved panic attacks, a failed calculus midterm, and the gut-deep realization that I was building someone else's life, brick by brick, while mine sat untouched in the corner, collecting dust. I wasn't stupid. I knew what the Brooks name could buy me. Connections, capital, and probably a 6-figure salary at one of the family's projects by the time I hit 25. But I didn't want their damn blueprint. I wanted to build something that didn't smell like my grandfather's cigars and ego. So I moved into a shoebox apartment above a mechanic shop in a part of town my mom wouldn't even drive through. The walls were so thin I could hear the guy next door screaming at his PlayStation, and I shared a bathroom with 2 other units that clearly didn't believe in cleaning products. The futon had a metal bar right where my spine landed, and every morning I woke up sore, pissed off, and just stubborn enough to do it all over again. I lived on instant ramen, store-brand peanut butter, and the kind of coffee that tastes like regret and engine oil. There was a corner bodega 3 blocks down that sold 2 energy drinks for $1, and that became my religion. Monster in one hand, cracked laptop in the other, I'd sit for 14 hours a day just coding and dreaming and trying to forget what I'd left behind. I'd pitched my first app to a venture fund in Boston with a slide deck I built in PowerPoint, and nerves so shot I almost puked in the elevator. They said no, of course, they all said no at first. Too risky. Too green. Too vague. Some smiled while they rejected me, others didn't bother. I got real good at reading rejection by the tone of the first 2 questions in a meeting. And every time it happened, I'd come home, crash onto that sagging futon, stare at the cracked ceiling, and wonder if I was just another idiot with a dream and a delusion. The nights were the worst, honestly. When you've got no money, no backup plan, and no one texting you, you got this. The silence becomes its own kind of enemy. I'd scroll through my sister's LinkedIn page, see her new corner office, see the shiny family photos in front of new properties, and try to convince myself that envy wasn't tightening my chest like a vice. I'd get drunk on bitterness and cheap whiskey and reread emails I never sent. You know the ones, the fantasy takedown letters. The "you'll regret this when I'm rich" monologues we all write in our heads but never dare to send. I had dozens. Most of them addressed to Uncle Rick. And yet, I kept going. Maybe out of spite. Maybe because failure in front of them felt worse than living on couch cushions and caffeine. Maybe because deep down, I believed in something, even if I couldn't fully articulate it. I had this idea for a logistics optimization platform, basically, using AI to help mid-sized delivery companies reduce wasted fuel and route delays. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't social media or crypto or some buzzy buzzword startup. But it was useful, real, tangible. And I knew the margins in that space were tight, which meant companies would pay good money to save a few % off the top. I started building a prototype with free Python libraries and half-broken APIs I duct-taped together with online tutorials and 20-hour coding marathons. I taught myself the basics of UI design, fumbled through cloud architecture, and pitched a barely functioning demo to a friend of a friend who managed a small logistics firm in Jersey. He didn't laugh. He didn't invest either, but he asked for a beta. That was the first tiny, flickering light in months of dark. I called Marco, my college roommate, and the only other person who believed in this madness, and told him it might finally be real. We worked like lunatics. Coffee in the morning, Red Bull at night, and nothing but code, broken feature lists, and that stubborn refusal to quit. I sold my old gaming laptop to pay server costs. Marco sold his signed vinyl collection to cover our LLC fees. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't Instagram-worthy. It was sweat, sacrifice, and silent doubt. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon, when I was seriously considering applying for a job at the UPS warehouse down the street, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer because I thought it was spam. It wasn't. It was a rep from an angel investment group out of Austin. One of them had seen a tweet about our app through a logistics blogger I had cold emailed weeks earlier. They wanted a pitch. A real one. With numbers. With vision. I didn't have a vision deck. I didn't even have pants that didn't smell like anxiety. But I said yes. I said yes, and I stayed up 48 hours putting together the best damn pitch I'd ever assembled. No sleep. Just black coffee and a full bottle of adrenaline and rage. And somewhere in that chaos, something shifted. I wasn't just some dropout with a dream anymore. I was a founder on the edge of a breakthrough. And this time, no one was going to laugh. The wire transfer came in at 3:17 on a cold Wednesday morning, and I stared at the number on the screen like it might disappear if I blinked too hard. $50,000. Not a million, not a moonshot, not the kind of sum that gets written up in glossy headlines, but enough. Enough to keep us alive. Enough to finally breathe without the gnawing fear of zero in the bank account. I sat on the edge of the futon, which by then had lost even the pretense of being a bed, and just stared at the screen like it held every answer I'd ever needed. Marco was asleep on the floor beside an open pizza box, snoring with one sock off and his laptop still playing a looped terminal log. We didn't pop champagne or take a victory lap. We ordered 2 egg sandwiches from a food truck down the block and got back to work. That money wasn't for celebrations, it was runway. It was the difference between dying with a half-built dream and maybe, just maybe, getting a shot to prove we weren't completely insane. I remember saying to Marco, "We've got 6 months to turn this into something that breathes," and he just nodded, already typing, eyes red from too much blue light and not enough sleep. The moment I told my family about the investment, stupidly, optimistically hoping it might be a bridge, instead of another wedge, it all went to hell faster than I expected. I had this dumb idea that maybe they'd soften up, maybe they'd see I wasn't just some dropout playing dress-up in a hoodie. I brought it up to my dad during a Sunday dinner, casually, like it was no big deal. I said, "We just got our first round of angel funding," and before I could even finish the sentence, he cut in with, "From who?" "Someone dumber than you." That was his idea of humor, sharp, cruel, and designed to hit soft tissue. My mom didn't say anything. She just looked down at her wine and kept swirling like it was her job to avoid involvement. Lisa said something snide about startups being the new lottery tickets for boys who can't commit. The next morning, my father sent me a short message. One line. "If you're serious about this, don't come asking for help when it falls apart." No love, Dad. No encouragement. Just that cold promise of abandonment. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say that wouldn't make it worse. A few hours later, Lisa blocked me on every platform. I only found out when I tried to send her a LinkedIn message to ask for a connection to a logistics contact she'd once mentioned. Her profile simply vanished. That's when it hit me this wasn't just a career decision. This was exile. I had chosen the cliff, and they had chosen not to watch me jump. So I threw myself into the only thing that didn't make me feel like a failure: work. Obsessive, monastic, all-consuming work. Marco and I turned our tiny, grimy apartment into a war room. Post-its on the walls, code scribbled on whiteboards we pulled out of a dumpster behind a charter school, 3 monitors blinking like an ICU unit. We ate, slept, and breathed the startup. Or at least we ate when we remembered. Slept when our bodies forced the issue. I remember one night waking up with my cheek pressed to the keyboard, a line of AAA stretching endlessly across the screen. I didn't even delete it. I just kept typing. The loneliness didn't come all at once. It leaked in around the edges, like rain through a cracked window. At first it was just forgetting what day it was. Then it was realizing you hadn't spoken to someone outside your apartment in a week. Eventually, it was getting sick and not having anyone to call. No mom to bring soup. No sister to check in. Just me and Marco and a Google Doc labeled version 4.3. This one better F*** king work. We were working on a huge update, one that integrated predictive analytics into the core routing algorithm. It had to be perfect. This was our make or break moment. A potential client with a fleet of 200 trucks was flying in from Chicago to see a live demo. If they signed, it would double our monthly recurring revenue overnight and put us on the map. Everything depended on that meeting. Everything. In the 72 hours before the pitch, we didn't sleep. I don't mean we took naps or shifts. I mean we worked until our fingers cramped and our vision blurred. I had 4 energy drinks in a row, then 2 double-shot espressos, and I still felt like I was moving through water. I started hallucinating little things, pings that weren't there, phantom bugs in the code. My hands shook when I typed. Marco kept saying, just a few more hours, we're almost there, like a mantra, like if he said it enough, it would become true. The morning of the pitch, I showered, shaved, and put on the one blazer I still owned. It didn't fit right. My collarbones stuck out like they were trying to escape. My eyes were sunken. I looked like someone trying to cosplay success. I remember staring at myself in the bathroom mirror, whispering, "Don't K this up," over and over like it was a spell. We set up the demo in the co-working space downtown that we'd borrowed from a friend. The room smelled like printer toner and desperation. Marco booted up the system while I laid out the handouts. Everything was on track until it wasn't. I was standing in front of the screen, rehearsing my opening line, when the world suddenly tilted. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a slow, lurching shift like the floor had become a wave beneath my feet. My mouth went dry. My vision narrowed. And then, without warning, everything just went. The last thing I remember is Marco's voice calling my name, distant and panicked, like it was coming from the end of a long hallway. Then black. Just black. When I woke up, there was a dull beeping sound somewhere to my left, and the first thing I saw was a white ceiling with a crack that ran diagonally like someone had tried to slice the sky in half. The second thing I saw was Marco's face hovering above mine, equal parts worry and pure relief, like he'd just watched a bomb diffuse itself in slow motion. I was in a hospital room, hooked up to an IV that pumped a clear liquid into my arm while a machine quietly tracked the rhythm of my heart, which, for the record, was beating like it had been through war. They told me I'd passed out from exhaustion and dehydration, that my body had essentially hit the emergency brakes because I'd ignored every warning light on the dashboard for too long. I was lucky. They said lucky I didn't collapse during the pitch. Lucky Marco caught me before my head hit the corner of the desk. Lucky the startup hadn't collapsed with me. I wasn't sure I believed in luck anymore. All I knew was that I felt empty physically, mentally, emotionally, like every ounce of drive I'd ever had burned itself out in one final burst of effort, and now I was just the husk left behind. But here's the twist you didn't see coming, the one that still feels like fiction when I say it out loud. The pitch still went through. Somehow, Marco pulled it off. He walked the client through the demo while I lay unconscious in a hospital bed, running on nothing but muscle memory and caffeine residue, and the client didn't walk out. In fact, he signed a 90-day pilot program on the spot. Said the product was exactly what his fleet needed. Said we had something real. I came home from the hospital to an inbox full of unread emails, missed calls, LinkedIn messages, and 2 different journalists who wanted to have a quick chat about your recent growth. I thought it was a prank at first. But then I saw the analytics dashboard. Our app had spiked in usage by over 300%. Word had spread. The Chicago deal had triggered a ripple effect. Mid-sized logistics companies, the ones we'd built this for, started signing up like wildfire. They weren't just curious, they were desperate. Fuel costs were killing their bottom lines. Labor shortages were cutting efficiency in half. They didn't want flashy, they wanted functional. And that's exactly what we gave them. Within 2 weeks, we hit 10,000 monthly users. Within 6, we were cash flow positive for the first time since launching. Marco cried when we paid ourselves our first real salaries, not much, but enough to finally ditch the futon and the ramen. Enough to feel like maybe, just maybe, we weren't totally out of our minds after all. We upgraded our workspace to a tiny office with one window and a door that didn't stick when you pulled it shut. We hired 2 interns who had no clue what they were doing but showed up every day hungry to learn. And for the first time in forever, I could breathe without that low-grade panic humming in the back of my skull. Then Forbes called. It wasn't a joke, and it wasn't a mistake. An editor had heard about our software through a VC blog, checked the numbers, checked the story, and reached out. She said the team loved the underdog angle, the bootstrapped hustle, the fact that we'd gone from couch cushions to clients without any legacy funding or family help. She asked for a short interview, some photos, and a few quotes for the 30 under 30 logistics and tech feature. I said yes, of course I said yes, but I didn't let myself believe it was real until the day the magazine dropped. I was standing in line at a newsstand in Soho, holding a coffee that had gone cold and a sense of nervous anticipation that made me feel like I was waiting for a test result. The clerk dropped a fresh stack of magazines onto the rack, and there it was, my face, my name, my company, right there on the cover like it belonged. The headline read, "Disrupting Delivery, How a Burned-Out Dropout is Saving Logistics One Algorithm at a Time." I stood there for a full minute, just staring at it. Not moving. Not blinking. The clerk asked if I was okay, and I realized I was gripping the coffee cup so tightly it had collapsed in on itself. I bought 5 copies. Then I bought 5 more. I walked out of that shop with the magazine tucked under my arm like a trophy, and I thought about every single person who had told me to quit. Every family dinner where I was the punchline. Every conversation that ended with, maybe it's time to grow up. And I didn't feel triumphant, not really. I felt something quieter. Something sharper. Not revenge. Not vindication. Something like grief, but backwards. Like I'd finally found the version of myself I'd always known existed, and now I had to figure out what the hell to do with him. Because here's the truth no one tells you about getting everything you wanted. It doesn't erase the past. It just makes the silence louder. I called my dad that night. He didn't pick up. I sent my sister a photo of the cover. No reply. And then, the next morning, I got the first email from Uncle Rick. Subject line, "Let's catch up. Got some ideas for collaboration." I didn't open it right away. I just sat there, staring at it, and wondering why the victory felt so damn hollow. The emails came in waves, like aftershocks following a quiet but devastating earthquake, each one just a little more casual, a little more presumptive than the last. At first it was just Uncle Rick, the same man who'd toasted my so-called failure in front of everyone I'd ever loved, now suddenly addressing me like we were business partners who just happened to take a few years off from collaborating. His first email didn't even mention the Forbes cover directly, which somehow made it worse, like he was trying to pretend it was no big deal. The subject line read, "Let's grab lunch, got some ideas cooking." And the body of the message was full of vague flattery, references to synergies and new opportunities on the horizon that I could potentially get in on early. Not a single word acknowledging the toast, the laughter, the years of dismissal. Just polished language and investor buzzwords, like that erased the weight of what came before. Then came the follow-up 3 days later, "Sent you something earlier this week. Not sure if you missed it, just bumping this up in your inbox." I didn't reply to that one either. And when he sent the third message, Asterisk, Ethan, we'd be lucky to have you in the room on this one. Asterisk, I finally clicked mark as unread and walked away from my laptop. It wasn't just the gall of it that got under my skin. It was the way he said we, like I was one of them again, like the last 5 years hadn't happened. Like he hadn't laughed so hard at my expense he had to wipe tears from his eyes while I sat there pretending it didn't tear me apart from the inside out. But it wasn't just Rick. After the Forbes cover, the rest of the family came slinking back too, each with their own brand of selective memory and veiled intentions. My cousin Derek sent me a congratulatory text that included a link to his latest venture and a "just wanted to show you what I've been working on too." Lisa, of all people, unblocked me on LinkedIn and sent a one-line message. "Looks like you proved us all wrong. Congrats." No apology. No warmth. Just acknowledgement. Cold. Calculated. Like a PR statement sent out after bad press. Even my dad, who hadn't called me in over a year, left a voicemail that started with, "Well, look who finally made the big time," and ended with, "Call me sometime. Want to pick your brain about something I'm working on." None of them asked how I was doing. None of them asked what it took to get there. They just saw the headline and wanted a piece. And the worst part? Some tiny, bruised part of me still wanted them to care. Not the way they were pretending to now, but honestly, sincerely, without the pretense of contracts or investment portfolios. I wanted someone in that family to say, "I'm proud of you, and I was wrong." But that was never going to happen. The Brooks clan didn't do apologies. They did control. And now that I had something they wanted, the game had changed, but the rules were the same. I tried to ignore them. I buried myself in product updates, investor calls, team huddles, and late-night walks around the city that mostly involved me muttering arguments I'd never get to have out loud. But the emails kept coming, and they were getting bolder. Rick sent over a deck from some logistics startup he'd invested in something about real-time warehouse optimization and asked if we could jump on a quick Zoom to sync vision. Another message included a line that made my skin crawl. "We were all rooting for you, you know. Tough love is still love, kid." That was the one that broke me. Because no, they weren't rooting for me. They were waiting for me to fail so they could be right. And now that they weren't, they wanted to rewrite the past like they were always in my corner. It was gaslighting, wrapped in business casual language. And I hated how much it still got to me. Marco noticed. He always noticed when I got quiet for too long. One night, after a long day of interviews and onboarding our newest dev, he sat across from me in our cluttered little office and just asked, "You good, man?" I didn't lie. I told him about the emails. I told him about Rick. I told him how I still felt that kid inside me, the one who smiled and raised a glass while the whole room laughed, waiting for someone to say, "We see you now." Marco leaned back in his chair, cracked open a warm beer, and said something I've never forgotten. "You don't owe them closure. You owe yourself peace. Don't confuse the two." I stared at my screen for a long time that night, Rick's latest email still open, blinking cursor waiting like a dare. I hovered over delete. Then I clicked reply. Just one sentence. "Sure. Let's meet. Just to talk." I didn't know what I was walking into. But I knew I wasn't walking in as the same man who left that dinner table in silence all those months ago. And for once, that felt like enough. The cafe Rick picked was one of those places that tried way too hard to be trendy, the kind with reclaimed wood tables, Edison bulbs hanging from the ceiling like industrial ornaments, and a menu written entirely in chalk script that made it impossible to tell whether you were ordering a latte or being tricked into joining a cult. I got there 10 minutes early, not because I was eager, but because I needed time to steel myself. I picked the table farthest from the door, facing out toward the sidewalk so I could see him coming, so I wouldn't get caught off guard, and ordered a black coffee strong enough to strip paint. When he finally walked in, I knew immediately that he hadn't changed. Same swagger, same oversized leather jacket he probably thought made him look rugged instead of outdated, same grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. He spotted me, pointed like we were meeting at a damn sports bar, and strolled over like we were old war buddies catching up after years apart. I stood, mostly out of instinct, and gave him a tight nod. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat like he owned the room, spreading his legs wide and tossing his sunglasses on the table without a second thought. I noticed he didn't order anything. Of course not. He wasn't here for the coffee. He opened with pleasantries. How's the business? How's New York treating you? Heard you got some pretty big coverage recently. And I let him talk, let him fill the space with his usual self-congratulatory noise, because I wanted to see where he thought this was going. Finally, after he'd run out of small talk, he leaned forward and tapped the table twice, like we were about to seal a deal, and said, "Look, I'll just get to it. I've got an opportunity that's perfect for you. We've got a logistics play that's ready to scale, and with your tech, we could kill it." I didn't say anything right away. I just looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the uncle who'd mocked me for years, but a man who'd built his entire life on someone else's blueprint and now found himself standing in front of a different kind of map he didn't understand. And he hated that. I could see it in the way his smile flickered every time I didn't respond the way he wanted me to. He wasn't here to collaborate. He was here to reclaim something. Power. Control. Legacy. Whatever the hell he thought I owed him. So I asked, flatly, "Why now, Rick?" He didn't miss a beat. "Because you're finally at the table, kid. You've proved yourself. You've built something. And I respect that." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I asked, "Where was that respect 2 years ago? When I couldn't afford to fix my radiator. When Lisa blocked me. When Dad told me not to come back until I woke up. Where the hell was this support when I needed it?" Rick waved a hand like he was swatting a fly. "You needed to go through the fire, Ethan. That's what makes a man. We all did. You think I got where I am without earning it? Without people riding my ass and doubting me?" I clenched my jaw and took a slow breath through my nose, trying to keep the heat from rising too fast. "You didn't just doubt me. You humiliated me. You toasted to my failure. You made a joke out of me in front of everyone I cared about." Rick leaned back in his chair, completely unfazed. "That's family, kid. We bust each other's balls. You should have taken it like a man instead of sulking about it." And that's when something in me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet, irreversible click of a trapdoor opening under your feet. I put down my coffee, leaned forward, and said, carefully, "You didn't build me. You didn't help me. And if you think I owe you anything for the way you treated me, for the way this family buried me every chance it got, then you're not just an asshole, you're delusional." He stared at me for a moment, the edges of his grin hardening, his eyes narrowing just slightly. "You wouldn't be who you are if we hadn't pushed you," he said, voice lower now, more controlled. "You're strong because of us. We made you tough." That's when I said it, the thing I can't ever take back, the thing that split whatever fragile thread of civility we'd pretended existed between us. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "No, Rick. You didn't make me strong. You made me numb. There's a difference." His mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but the words didn't come. Instead, he just shook his head, grabbed his sunglasses, and stood. No handshake. No smile. Just one last jab. "You'll come around eventually. When you realize you're not as different from us as you think." He walked out without looking back, leaving the chair slightly off-center, like even furniture didn't want to be near him. I sat there for a long time after he left, coffee cold, hands steady, heart racing not with anger, but with something quieter, clarity, maybe. Or just grief for the version of myself that had waited so long for that conversation to end differently. I'd said what needed to be said. But I also knew, deep down, that some bridges don't burn. They just rot slowly until one day, you step on them expecting to cross, and they collapse under your feet. The email came in just after midnight on a Monday, the kind of night where time didn't feel linear anymore, just a blur of backlit screens, takeout containers, and muted exhaustion hanging in the air like static. Marco had already passed out on the office couch, curled up in a hoodie he hadn't taken off in 3 days, while I stayed at my desk, pushing through bug reports with the kind of tunnel vision that only kicks in after you've ignored every basic human need for too long. The subject line caught my eye because it didn't scream for attention. It was simple, measured, and from a name I recognized instantly: Daniel Klein, general partner at Agave Capital, one of the most respected and, let's be honest, most intimidating venture firms in the game. I clicked it open, heart thumping even though I told myself not to get hyped too fast, and read the message 3 times before it really registered. They were interested. More than interested, they wanted a meeting to discuss a full Series A round, north of $7 million, contingent on one particular condition buried in the 3rd paragraph like a landmine waiting to detonate. They'd been following our progress since the Forbes piece had quietly tracked our user growth and loved our roadmap. They believed the logistics sector was about to explode post-pandemic, and our tech could be the pickaxe in a gold rush of outdated infrastructure needing automation. All good, right? But then I hit the line that froze everything. We'd want to structure the deal in collaboration with Brooks Logistics Solutions to immediately expand distribution and integration into mid-size carriers already using their system. I had to read it again, out loud this time, because part of me genuinely couldn't believe it. Brooks Logistics Solutions. Rick's company. The same man who just tried to gaslight me into thinking his abuse was some kind of twisted mentorship. The same company whose name had haunted every real estate project growing up, whose logo was stamped into the concrete of every parking garage I'd ever been dragged to as a kid. Agave wanted a deal, but they also wanted Rick. They wanted the convenience of a pipeline he controlled, the infrastructure he owned, and they wanted me to sign on as if nothing had ever happened. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I shut the laptop without replying and walked out into the freezing night, letting the city slap me awake with its noise and cold. I walked for 2 hours, aimless, circling blocks I didn't recognize, trying to make sense of what it meant. This was the opportunity we had been waiting for: real money, real runway, the kind of boost that could take us from scrappy to sustainable. But the price wasn't just equity. It was pride. It was legacy. It was sitting across a table from the man who had once laughed in my face and pretending we were equals now. Marco was quiet when I told him the next morning. He read the email twice, same as I had, then leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling like it might provide a better answer than I could. "It's a smart move on their part," he said finally. "They want to de-risk the rollout, and Rick's company already has the fleet network." I nodded because I knew he was right. Logically, strategically, it made perfect sense. But business isn't just logic. It's blood and history and ghosts you never really exorcise. Asterisk, if we take this deal, I said, we give him a win. He gets to spin it like he backed me from day one. Marco looked at me hard, then said, "Do you want to build the best product in the space or settle a family score?" And that's the question that kept me up for 3 nights straight. Because the truth is, I didn't know anymore. Every time I thought about signing that deal, I saw my younger self in that dining room, surrounded by laughter that wasn't kind, by people who looked at me like I was a punchline instead of a person. I remembered the futon, the hunger, the silence. And I knew deep in my chest that the man who suffered through all that didn't do it so Rick could slap his name on the finish line. But then I looked at our metrics, our burn rate, our goals for the next quarter, and I couldn't deny that the deal would change everything. It would mean a team that could breathe. It would mean pushing features that had lived on the wish list into reality. It would mean winning by the numbers, at least. I went back and forth so many times that I started arguing with myself out loud, pacing the office, muttering like a lunatic. Pride said burn the offer and send Agave a polite but firm thanks, but no thanks. Ambition said swallow the bitterness and get the job done. And somewhere in the middle was a voice I didn't recognize, quieter, steadier, asking, "What kind of leader do you want to be?" I printed the contract on heavy stock paper, the kind that feels serious in your hands, and laid it on my desk. Marco left to give me space, just a silent fist bump and a nod that said, Whatever you choose, I'm in. And now I was alone with the weight of it. 7 pages. A single signature. A future I could build or walk away from. My hand hovered over the pen, heartbeat loud in my ears, memories screaming at me from every corner of the room. The choice was mine, and for the first time in years, that terrified me. The office was quiet that morning, so quiet it almost felt like the whole city had decided to take a breath and hold it in suspension, as if it somehow knew what kind of decision was about to be made behind our locked glass door. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in thin, slanted stripes across the floor, cutting through the stale air that had been filled with recycled ambition, burnt coffee, and the kind of tension you could taste if you bit down hard enough. I hadn't slept again, not really, just laid awake with the contract spread open on the kitchen table like a patient waiting for surgery, and me pacing circles around it trying to decide whether I was the surgeon or the executioner. I picked up the pen that morning with a kind of resignation I hadn't felt before, the heaviness not coming from uncertainty anymore, but from the weight of knowing that no matter which box I checked, something in me would not walk away unchanged. It's easy to think there's a clear line between winning and losing, that success has a sharp outline, a definitive shape you can step into and wear like armor. But standing there, pen hovering over that signature line, I realized that sometimes victory is just a quieter kind of surrender. I signed it. No press release. No champagne. No fist pump. Just ink on paper, a whisper in the storm. Marco came in around 10, holding 2 coffees and an eyebrow raised so high it practically touched his hairline. He asked me without asking, just with his eyes, and I handed him the signed agreement like I was handing over a loaded weapon. He took it, read it in silence, and then sat down in his chair without saying a word for at least a minute. When he finally did speak, it was with a tone I hadn't heard before, less certainty, more curiosity. "So this is what it costs," he said softly, tapping the corner of the contract with his thumb. "The crown." I didn't answer because I wasn't sure if the cost was measured in money or pride or some deeper currency that only gets tallied once you're too far gone to reverse the exchange. What I did know, what I felt in my bones, was that the boy who sat at that birthday dinner table, raising a glass with a smile that masked 1,000 tiny fractures, would have laughed in my face if he saw me now. Or maybe he would have cried. Maybe both. I didn't call Rick. I didn't know him that. Instead, I left a voicemail, short, direct, and emotionless. "The deal's done. We'll be moving forward with integration starting next quarter. You'll hear from our legal team by Monday." That's all. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say we were partners. Because we weren't. He was still the same man who toasted to my downfall, and I was still the same kid who had something to prove. The only thing that changed was the balance sheet. Over the next few weeks, the rollout began. Engineers on both sides worked through the integration, dashboards got redesigned, systems aligned, and suddenly our platform was reaching trucks and terminals in 25 new cities. Investors were thrilled. Our valuation tripled. My inbox flooded with congratulations from people who'd once left me on read. I got invited to speak at 2 conferences, both of which offered honorariums that were more than I'd made in my first 2 years combined. I even got a call from my father, who left a voicemail saying, "Looks like you've finally figured it out. Proud of you, son." I didn't call back, because I didn't know if that pride was for the man I became or the boy he always wanted me to be. And frankly, I didn't care enough anymore to ask. One night, maybe a week after the deal closed, I stood alone in the new apartment I'd just moved into, high ceilings, quiet walls, a view of the skyline that looked like something out of a dream, and I tried to feel proud. I poured a glass of whiskey I couldn't pronounce, leaned against the window, and stared at the city like it owed me something. But the truth was, all I felt was tired. Not regret, not exactly. Just the kind of bone-deep fatigue that comes when you finally stop fighting the world long enough to realize you've been carrying the war inside you the whole time. I thought about recording a message. Something raw. Something honest. Telling the full story, putting the real version of it out there before the narrative got eaten alive by PR spin and investor polish. But I didn't, because maybe some stories are meant to stay unfinished. Maybe some victories are supposed to leave a bitter taste, just to remind you that no throne ever came without splinters. So here's what I'll say, and I'll say it only once. I made the call. I signed the deal. I took the crown. And whether I sold out or rose above depends on who's telling the story. But either way, I won't be toasting with them.